Hi guys, it's Alice, and today it is time to talk about the books I read in the last part of March. First up, I read an ebook, and it was Are You There Alone by Suzanne O'Malley. This is a true crime book, and in it, the author explores the case of Angela Yates, who murdered all 5 of her children. So as most of you will know, I'm really interested in true crime, and I had already heard of this case, but I wanted to read this book to see if I could learn more about it, and I did do that, but I gotta say, I really didn't enjoy this book, and I didn't even find it all that interesting. It's not the case that's not interesting. That is obviously absolutely horrifying. It's the way that it's presented in this book. I found the whole thing to be incredibly stale and dry, and the author isn't just your average journalist either. She actually had contact with several people that were involved in the case. She had interviews with them, and she even reported on the whole trial. So you would think that this would be amazing, but it was honestly just really boring. The only part I felt emotionally moved by was the very beginning when she describes what actually happened, which is honestly just like the worst thing ever. But the rest of it, it didn't really pull me in, and I found the whole thing to be incredibly impersonal. The one thing I did like about this is that it discusses mental illness quite a lot, and it sheds a lot of light on that topic, and that is the only reason that I've given this book 2 stars instead of 1. The second book I read was one that was sent to me by the publisher, and it is Murder in Belgravia by Lynn Brittany. This is a historical mystery, and it's set during the First World War, and it's about a chief inspector who is trying to solve the murder of a lord, and to do this he recruits a team of intelligent men and women to help him. I was really excited to read this book because I thought the premise of it sounded amazing, but sadly I didn't really enjoy this that much. The concept of this book is good, but the execution of it is, in my opinion, not. The setting is pretty interesting and the murder is pretty good. Like, I liked trying to figure out who had done it, but the characters in this are completely lacking in depth. They are vapid and one-dimensional, and I feel like the only reason that they're here is to fill their role in solving the mystery and nothing more. And I was literally not interested in any of them. I was especially disappointed with the way that the women were portrayed in this book, because I was really excited to see female characters do this exciting work in this particular time period. But both of the female characters that are a part of the murder mystery squad felt so bland to me, even though that they were initially introduced as interesting characters. Like, one of them is a woman doctor, which was uncommon for this time period. They just literally had no spark to them. There were also several instances where the women are referred to as being suitably chastened, which I interpret as being put in their place by some male characters. And the first time I read that, I was like, okay, whatever. But it happened again and again and again, and I just kept rolling my eyes at it because it wasn't written in a way where it's anything else than the men looking down at the women, if that makes sense. The women just felt like accessories to the men and nothing more. Overall, I just thought this was very average, and the further into it I got, the less I cared, and I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. Then I picked up A Meditation on Murder by Robert Thorogood. This is another mystery novel, and it's set on a fictional island where a spiritual guru at this luxury retreat has been murdered inside of a locked room, and the very hot, bothered, and annoyed Detective Inspector Richard Poole is called in to investigate. So I picked this up knowing that it is a cozy mystery, and it probably wasn't gonna blow me away, but it was just gonna be one of those enjoyable, low-effort books, and that's exactly what this was. One of my favorite things about this is the main character and how he is so out of place in this setting, and he is so annoyed at everything because it added a fun comedy element to this. I do think that he is a little bit silly, maybe overly silly at times, and I think that he could have been a little bit more layered. I know that this is based on a TV series that I haven't watched, and I think that I would have had a clearer picture of him if I had watched the TV show, but I also feel like that shouldn't really be necessary. All of the characters in here do feel a little bit one-dimensional, but for some reason it didn't really bother me that much, probably because I was really intrigued by the mystery and I loved the setting. The story is a little bit silly sometimes, but I feel like every once in a while you just want to read something that is zero effort, and this is exactly that. Overall, I thought this was entertaining and easy to read and easy to get lost in, and exactly what I needed when I picked it up. And I actually think I'm gonna keep going with this series because it's the perfect kind of book to have on hand when you're tired and you just don't know what to read and you just want to read something easy. And I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. Second to last, I read Lubich by Philip K. Dick. This is a science fiction book and it's really hard to explain what this is about, but it's set in a world where humans have colonized the moon and psychic abilities are quite common, and a group of people find that their realities are shifting after they've been involved in this event. So this was a really weird experience for me to read because I was really intrigued by this world and all the people in it, but I've also never been so confused in my whole life. The blurb of this book doesn't really explain a whole lot, which is usually fine, but when you start reading this, you're immediately thrust into this world where everything is different and there are terms and words that you don't know what it means, and the book doesn't really go to great lengths to explain a lot of that to you. Because of that, it took me a little while to get into this, and when I felt like I had everything in place, like I knew who the people were and I knew what they were doing, then the storyline shifts and reality and time start slipping and I was just totally lost again. I don't know if it's just me, but I was so confused that I had to resort to Wikipedia to figure out what was going on. Sometimes I consult Wikipedia with other books as well because I can't remember characters or something like that, but with this I desperately needed it because I couldn't understand what was going on. By the end of this though, all the pieces do fall into place and you realize what has been happening, but I almost feel like I need to read this again to get the full picture because I feel like I read it in a fog of confusion, and now that I'm out of it, I'm like, yeah, it was pretty good, but when I was reading it, it wasn't really that good, if that makes sense. I'm going to keep this and try and reread it at some point because I feel like I like it a lot more the second time around, but this time I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Lastly, I read one of the Little Penguin Moderns, and it was Of Dogs and Walls by Yuko Tsushima. This is fiction and it contains 2 little stories, and this is the first time that these stories have been translated into English. So this was a really short book, obviously, and I don't really have that much to say about it. I've never read anything else by Tsushima, this is my first by her, and I thought that the writing was really beautiful, but the stories themselves didn't really have an impact on me. It's one of those books that I feel like you read, you think, oh well that was nice, and you put it down and you never think about it again. So I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. Now onto the books that I'm currently reading. I have got a fiction book called Bienes Historia by Maja Lunde, and the English title of this is The History of Bees. And this is a historical fiction / dystopian novel. And I've also got a non-fiction book called Infinity in the Palm of Your Hand by Marcus Chown, and this is a science book about the universe. Okay guys, those are all the books that I had to talk about today. I'd love to know what you all have been reading in the past few weeks, and if you've read any of the books that I mentioned, what you thought of them, and I will see you soon. Bye!